Hey everyone, Noah here. At 11 a.m. Eastern this morning, the President of the United States didn't just propose a new tariff. He drew a line in the sand and aimed an economic howitzer across it. The declaration, a 100% tariff, a complete doubling of price, on every single good entering the United States from Canada. The stated reason, because Canada dared to sign a trade deal with China. On the surface, this looks like another impulsive Trump tantrum, a retaliatory blast against an ally for a perceived slight. But if you think this is just about wounded pride or electric vehicles, you are missing the entire story. What we are witnessing is the opening salvo in a 6-month negotiation that will decide the fate of North America itself. This is about sovereignty, survival, and a ticking clock that reaches zero on July 1st. The 100% tariff threat is not the story. It is the loudest possible signal of the story about to unfold. The fuse was lit 1 week ago, not in Washington, but in Beijing. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, the former central banker who replaced Justin Trudeau, walked into the Great Hall of the People, ending an 8-year deep freeze in Sino-Canadian relations. The outcome was a compact that reset the board. In exchange for China slashing punitive tariffs on Canadian canola and seafood, Canada would allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles annual entry at a modest 6.1% duty. Carney hailed it as a landmark, a strategic partnership. In the farmlands of Saskatchewan, it was a lifeline. In the auto workshops of Ontario, it was a betrayal. And in the White House, it was seen as something far more dangerous, an act of secession. This move was not made in a vacuum. Just 2 years prior, Canada had stood shoulder to shoulder with the U.S., imposing mirror 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs to protect the integrated North American auto industry. Carney's deal was a deliberate, clean break from that united front. It was a declaration of economic independence, and it was delivered with a rhetorical flourish just days later at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Before a global audience of elites, Carney gave a speech that omitted Trump's name but left no doubt about its target. He spoke of coercion by great powers, of treating allies as subordinates, of a rupture, not a transition. The room gave him a standing ovation, a stark, public rebuke of the American posture under Trump. The next day, Trump took the same stage. His message was scattershot, touching on Greenland, unnamed weak leaders, and then, zeroing in, Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark. Carney's retort was immediate and calibrated. Canada thrives because it's Canadian. This public defiance triggered a cascade, a rescinded invitation to a Trump peace board, a barrage of social media insults, and then, this morning, the ultimate economic threat. But to write this off as a petty feud is to misunderstand the grand chessboard. The real game is the impending mandatory review of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, the cornerstone of $2 trillion in annual trilateral trade. That review begins in earnest on July 1, 2026. Every action right now, the China deal, the Davos speeches, the tariff threat, is pre-negotiation positioning for that moment. Trump's overarching strategic anxiety, one his trade officials have voiced for years, is backdoor Chinese access. The fear is that China will use factories in Canada or Mexico as transshipment points, doing just enough final assembly to qualify goods as North American under USMCA rules, thereby bypassing steep U.S. tariffs on China. The Canada-China EV deal, in Trump's view, is the blueprint for this evasion. Today, it's 49,000 finished cars for the Canadian market. Tomorrow, it could be Chinese battery gigafactories in Ontario, whose outputs, stamped Made in Canada, flow tariff-free into the U.S. heartland. His 100% tariff threat is a brutal attempt to force Canada back into alignment before the USMCA review even starts. He wants to renegotiate the pact with much stricter rules of origin and explicit clauses that bind Canadian and Mexican trade policy with China to Washington's dictates. But Carney is not playing the part of the compliant neighbor. His entire strategy is predicated on the opposite concept, diversification. For Canada, the terrifying lesson of the Trump era is that overdependence on the U.S. market, which takes 75% of Canadian exports, is a profound national vulnerability. When your sole major customer can, on a whim, threaten to annex your territory, call your leader governor, or impose devastating tariffs for political theater, you are not a partner. you are a hostage. The China deal, and the deliberate pivot to Asia and Europe it represents, is Canada's attempt to build an escape hatch. Carney isn't moving toward China because he loves their geopolitical model. He's moving because Trump has made the old model of relying on the U.S. untenable. The 100% tariff threat ironically proves his point. This sets up a historic clash of wills and a devastating economic paradox. Trump's leverage is the sheer size of the U.S. market. His bet is that the pain of 100% tariffs, which would cause immediate recession-level shock in Canada, will force Ottawa to capitulate. Yet Carney's leverage is the mutual destruction such tariffs would unleash. The border is not an abstraction. It is a vast, living organism of intertwined supply chains. 36 U.S. states count Canada as their top export destination. Nearly 60% of U.S. crude oil imports, 85% of electricity imports, and critical streams of steel, aluminum, and uranium come from Canada. Doubling the cost of these inputs overnight wouldn't just hurt Canada, it would shatter U.S. auto manufacturing, energy grids, and construction, imposing thousands of dollars in annual costs on American families. Trump believes America can absorb the pain better. Carney is betting that American businesses and voters will not tolerate it. Furthermore, Carney has done something tactically brilliant. He has made his defiance public and principled. The Davos speech framed the struggle not as a narrow trade dispute, but as a defense of sovereignty and rules-based order against coercion. This resonates globally. Mexico is watching, Europe is watching. They are all asking the same sobering question. If this is how Washington treats its closest ally and largest trading partner, what would it do to us? Trump's tactic may win a concession, but at the cost of permanently corroding the trust that has made America the anchor of the global system for 80 years. So, we arrive at the precipice of the next 6 months. The path forward forks in 3 possible directions. Path 1. Capitulation. Canada blinks. Carney, facing the fury of Canadian exporters, walks back the China deal or aligns it completely with U.S. demands. The USMCA review proceeds with Canada and Mexico accepting stricter, U.S.-dictated rules on Chinese engagement. North American integration continues, but with Canadian and Mexican sovereignty diminished. The Davos speech becomes an empty, forgotten gesture. Path 2. Escalation. Trump follows through, imposing the 100% tariffs. A brutal trade war commences, fracturing supply chains, shuttering factories on both sides of the border, and triggering a North American recession. The USMCA review collapses in acrimony, placing the entire $2 trillion trade zone on a path to dissolution by 2036. The economic pain is severe and mutual. Path 3. Negotiated détente. Behind the public bluster, a deal is struck. Canada makes concessions on USMCA rules of origin and enhances scrutiny of Chinese investment, giving Trump a win on his backdoor concern. In return, the U.S. provides ironclad long-term tariff stability and acknowledges Canada's right to pursue independent trade deals within defined boundaries. The 100% tariff threat is withdrawn. Carney's actions suggest he is steering toward Path 3, but is prepared for Path 2. He has calculated that long-term sovereignty is worth short-term pain. The China deal was his down payment on a future where Canada is not an economic captive. Trump's calculation is the mirror. That long-term strategic dominance over China requires total economic discipline from America's backyard. The 100% tariff threat, therefore, is not about Chinese electric vehicles or canola. It is a brute force attempt to answer a fundamental post-Trump question. In an era of great power competition, can America's allies maintain their own sovereign economic policies, or must they become vassals in a U.S.-led economic bloc? The answer will be written in the negotiation rooms between now and July, and in the political reactions on both sides of the 49th parallel. Watch Carney's next statement. Watch the early technical talks for the USMCA review. Watch the pressure from U.S. governors and industry CEOs who have everything to lose. This is where the real battle is being fought. The headlines about tariffs are just the thunder before the storm.